Welcome back. Today I'm going to analyze two daily games that I played on chess.com recently. I don't know if my opponent is actually subscribed to this channel, but they have commented here in the past. That's why I chose these two games. I do remember them, and if I'm not mistaken, one of them was pretty short, the other one was a little longer, and both were decided by pieces that got hung. As always, when I analyze a game, usually my games, but sometimes other people's, the whole point is to learn something, usually from my mistakes, sometimes from the opponent's mistakes. Let's take a look at this first one, which I have pulled up here. Yeah, this one was only 9 moves long. In this one, my opponent opened with d4, which I have had trouble with. I've been playing knight to f6, very often trying to, fianchetto the bishop over here on the king side. Sometimes I, end up having to play the d-pawn because they try to push their e-pawn, that kind of thing. In this one, my opponent brought this bishop out, which led me to believe that they were playing the London system. And against that, I have been playing g6 and fianchettoing the bishop. Here, Stockfish would get the c-pawn out. You can also play e3, you can play e4, you can get the other knight out. I think there's a whole bunch of moves here that result in a relatively even game. My opponent played e3, which confirmed my idea that they were playing the London system. And here, best move for me, fianchetto, but I could also play c5. And I think in this position, Black has a bunch of moves that, maintain a relative equality. I played this, that's what I've been playing. And when I did play the London system a long time ago, I think here I got this, either got this bishop out or played c3 or got the knight out. I don't remember exactly what order I did those in, but very often if my opponent hadn't played this d-pawn yet, I went ahead and played c4 here. The engine says it would play c3 or knight to f3, but getting this bishop out is pretty close. Looks like it's a little worse, but it's still very close to even, and I'm pretty sure I've played exactly that from the other side here. And here what I've been doing most of the time is just castling, because my opponent hasn't yet made a move to get this pawn up here to threaten that knight. I just go ahead and castle. But because it's a daily game, you have access to the opening books. And very often when I play an opponent I'm unfamiliar with, or I'm in a position I'm unfamiliar with, but it's still really early, I check the opening book to see if there's something that I've been missing. And here it says it suggested c5 was one of the moves that masters play. And I wasn't sure about that. I thought if I played that, they would just push past. I didn't think they would take it, because if they take it, that diverts one of their center pawns, which I think is the point of c5. I'm not sure, but I think that is. I was worried more that they would push past and be able to build up an even stronger or more advanced center. But since my ratings and all these time controls have slipped over the last year, I thought it was worth the risk to try something new. So I played c5 here. It looks like the opponent is just supposed to ignore it. Play c3, play knight to f3 in preparation for castling, I assume. But my opponent took the pawn, which again, I wasn't really expecting, but it's one of the things that could possibly happen. I, of course, don't know, because you cannot look at the engine during daily games, just like any other kind of game that my advantage had crept up just a little bit. Here, again, I wasn't sure. Should I castle? Should I get this knight out? On the other side, when you play the c-pawn and they take it, I think you're supposed to get the knight out to block that pawn from coming forward, and also to kind of control some center squares there. That's not one of the suggested moves. Stockfish is suggesting knight to h5, which comes after this bishop here. It says they would leave it alone, just leave it there. They would play c3, and then I would take that bishop. Interesting. And the very few times that I've done a move kind of like this, usually on the other side, the opponent just moves the bishop. I think if I'd played this, they would have dropped back, and had I taken it, they would have taken with their h-pawn, opening up their rook there. But I don't know. That's not what it says would happen. The other move is knight to d5, which I guess also attacks the bishop. And again, it says they would ignore it, play c3, and I would take it. But again, I'm pretty sure they would have just moved it back. What if I had played here and they had just dropped this back? Like so. Oh, now I'm way ahead. Oh, because my bishop's... Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Because either way, I'm getting out of the way of this bishop, aiming for that. That's why they would play c3. Okay, well... Okay, I get it now, because they would play c3 to keep their rook from being taken. So I would take the bishop over here, and they would have to open up their king a little bit. Okay, but instead I just played this knight in front of the pawn, and that lost what little advantage I had. I think maybe the little lesson that I should take from that, or one of the lessons I should take from that, is that once I have fianchettoed my bishop, I really need to keep an eye on that diagonal, because not only is my bishop undefended right now because I haven't castled yet, but it is on one of the 2 longest diagonals on the board. And one of the whole reasons for putting it there is, is to aim down this way, controlling all of those squares. So I probably should have seen that. Either way, Stockfish would play c3 here. My opponent did not. They got the other knight out, which I think is fine. It gives me a little bit more of an advantage, but again, only if I play one of these 2 knight moves. And again, they would play c3, and I would take the bishop. Same thing as before. If they didn't play c3, then I would get this pawn down here, and then the rook for the bishop. Okay, I totally understand it now. So it probably wasn't a great idea that I played this b pawn over here. The idea, of course, is to A, get this bishop out, and B, see if they want to do anything with that pawn there. They're supposed to play knight to c3 here, and then it says I will take this pawn. They did not. They took my pawn. I did hesitate, wasn't sure if I should take with the pawn or the queen, but I thought if I took with the pawn, then I've got an isolated pawn. I mean, it's already isolated, but it's on this outside file, which I think is better than having it isolated on the B file. I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I took with the queen, which turns out to be my best move. I'm very, very slightly ahead. Now, of course, my queen is aimed there. I did not see the bishop aiming down there at their B pawn, but I do see that my queen is aiming at it. I expected my opponent to do something about that. They did not do anything about it. They put the knight up here. So I thought at worst I'm going to be able to take this pawn. Is that my best move? It is. Okay. I wasn't sure exactly what they would do after that, but as always, when I go to take a pawn like that, I try to think, do I have a way out if they can attack me somehow? I figured they could attack me by moving this knight over here. And, once my queen's down there, I could maybe slide out this way and come not there. Well, I would be attacking the knight. I don't know how they would defend the knight. Maybe move it back? No, that wouldn't defend the knight. Okay, yeah, so anyway, I went through several variations there. I went ahead and took the pawn. They're supposed to play knight to b5 or knight to a4. If they'd played knight to a4, oh, I'm supposed to check. And then when they block that check with the c pawn, which is protected by the knight's also protected by the queen. So maybe I couldn't have gotten out. I think if they had done that, I probably just would have come back someplace. I don't know how far I would have come back. But knight to b5 is their best move, which aims for this fork down here. And then I would play this move here again, knight to d5. I still probably wouldn't have seen that, but I don't know, maybe I would now, because that knight would be protecting against the fork on c7, and my bishop and queen would be lined up against that rook. Either way, my opponent did not move the knight. They moved the rook over, and so that hung a piece. It was my best move to take the knight, and they resigned. Okay, well, it looks like I didn't have any blunders or even maybe mistakes. The computer, had I run the analysis, probably would have counted missing that move twice as inaccurate. But I do understand why I should have probably played those earlier. But looking at this from my opponent's point of view, let's see, right here, before they did that, we're very close to even. Black has a very slight advantage. My rook's not in danger, so I don't need to move my rook, right? The rook is defended. The knight's the thing that's not defended. I think I would have seen that. I don't know that I would have played the best move, but I think I would have seen it. I don't know what the best way to defend it is, and I don't know that I would have found knight to b5, which is the best move. So I can't fault them for missing that. I don't often aim for that, and I probably need to look for it more. But yeah, I might have gone to the a4, knowing that if they did try to check me, I could block the check with the pawn so that the knight would be defended, and then the knight would be defending the pawn, and then they would have to move the queen again. It says they would move it back to a5, and then I would long castle. Well, I wouldn't have long castled. I would have short castled in that scenario. Probably. I think I would have seen that, but obviously you never know. And one thing about daily games that's different from, your timed game that you're in the whole time is that you make a move and you leave. And then you come back later, sometimes the same day, sometimes the next day. In this case, we each had 3 days to make each move. So I don't remember how long it was before they came back. But whenever you come back and you check on your game, they would have just seen, that I had just taken this pawn. It'll show that move on the board, and then you have to start looking. It feels like a totally new position, especially if, like me, you're playing 10 or more daily games at a time. So you're switching between them and you're only checking them once or twice a day, maybe 3 or 4 times a day. So it's a completely new position. You're just given this position and have to make a decision. Yeah, so I don't know if I would have seen it, but I would like to think that I would notice that is the undefended piece, and that's a check. Now, the other game against the same opponent went a little bit longer. And in this one, I remember hanging a piece but deciding to play on. And it turned out to work out for me. And that looks like what happened here. We were very even for quite a while, but then I think that's where I hung a piece and just kind of hung on until my opponent did something worse than that. It looks like, according to this chart here, that each one of us made 1 blunder and 1 inaccuracy, and that's it. And so there's my blunder, and that's their blunder. And as you can see, as I've mentioned before, not all blunders are created equal. My blunder took us from even to losing a little bit. Their blunder took them from winning, which they were right here, about -2 to +5. And that's a much bigger difference than the difference of my blunder. So whereas my blunder was a little drop, their blunder was a huge, gain there. So let's take a look. We have e4 from me. It was obviously a book move. That's weird that shows up for the very most common possible move in chess. But anyway, my opponent played the Sicilian defense. Now, I've heard, just like you have, that people at our level shouldn't play the Sicilian defense. However, I see it startlingly often, both in rapid games and in daily games. I've been playing knight to f3 in response to that, which I think is like the classical, or it just says Sicilian defense. My opponent usually gets this knight out, Stockfish would play d4 here. What I've been playing is this and fianchetting this other bishop. I think I saw that in a master game that I looked at. A few months ago, I looked at some master games from the very highest level of the Women's World Cup maybe, or possibly Women's Candidates Tournament. I don't remember. But anyway, I saw one of them playing this against the Sicilian. So that's what I've been doing. My opponent played e5 here. I fianchetted my bishop, still looks like a book move. It's the old Sicilian variation. Okay, I mean, the Sicilian's been around for a long time. Probably a ton of any sensible moves that you could make near the beginning of one of these games is in a book somewhere that some master has tried it at least sometime in the past. You'd have to do something, pretty weird to leave book, I think. D6, which is what my opponent played, is also a book move, and it was the top Stockfish move here. And here, am I supposed to get... No, I'm supposed to play bishop to c4. Okay, well, I did play bishop to c4 in preparation for castling. I know that they've kind of prepared a spot here for this knight. I don't know if they're ready to move it in there yet. Doesn't look like it's a good idea yet, but they've got 2 pawns defending that square, and I'm probably not going to trade for it because that gets them a slightly advanced pawn that blocks my bishop in. They played bishop to e6, which I have had in several positions, but I don't think in the Sicilian. I think I've had this in the Vienna game where I don't have my dark squared bishop up there or this fianchetto, but I do have this knight up here, and they play that, and I think I'm just supposed to take it, but I'm not here. Here I'm supposed to castle. Okay. Well, I remembered it from the other position, and I took it, which leaves us really close to even once they take back. I do know that one downside of this for black is obviously that it leaves the king open, but one downside for me is that they've got this mass of pawns in the center, and now I did castle, but it's not listed as my top move. I should have castled on my previous turn, but here I castled. Now my opponent has a very slight edge if they'll play knight to f6. They did. Now I'm supposed to play queen to e2, really, or d3. They look like they're about the same. Okay, I don't know why I would play queen to e2. I played here because I've got a dark squared bishop out here fianchettoed, and now I have all these pawns on light squares. I only have 2 pawns that are on dark squares, and that's part of my, my king unit over here. That's why I played that, because it protects that front pawn, which, of course, they have just attacked with their knight. Oh, maybe that's the reason for queen to e2 is because they had attacked that. But anyway, I defended it with the pawn and got another pawn on light squares. My opponent played what Stockfish says is their best move, bishop to e7. I mean, that kind of makes sense. They're ready to castle now, especially since they've opened up this diagonal. I played one of my better moves. My opponent castled. I don't think we're actually in book anymore. At least it didn't say that those last couple of moves were book moves. But here I definitely did not know what to do, and I almost never check the book out this far. When I say I check the opening book during daily games, I'm talking about like the first 5 moves. If something looks weird to me or if I'm unsure how to proceed. But we're talking move 9 now. I usually just assume we're out of book at this point. Anyway, I didn't know what to do, so I played a3. I know it's kind of a cop-out move, but my opponent responded in kind with a5, and now it says I'm supposed to play a4. Well, if I'm supposed to play a4 now, why didn't I play it on my previous turn? I didn't know that's what I was supposed to play. I did, however, notice that e-pawn's undefended, so this is why I played knight to g5. I didn't know it was my second best move, but I do know that a bunch of previous game evaluations, it's telling black to put their knight up here, and it's telling white to put their knight up here on g5 and g4. And most of the time, I don't know why. This time I did know why. I thought, they're going to be forced to defend that pawn, right? I would assume so. And their best move to defend that is queen to d7, which my opponent played. They're defending the pawn, and they removed the queen from the possible fork that would have happened. Again, I'm supposed to play a4. But I played knight to c4, and the reason that I did that was because I saw a possible fork opportunity on the other side, and that is my second best move, so I went there, again aiming for over here. My opponent is supposed to come after this first knight, really. I'm surprised by that, because if they played that, wouldn't I hop in here? It says I wouldn't. It said I would run away. But let me just ask, if they did play that, and I hopped in here, they would need to move their queen, right? I guess they could just come over, because when I went for the fork over this way, they would take my knight, then I would take the rook, and they would get that knight too, so they would get 2 knights for a rook. Okay, so yeah, maybe that is the best move. They didn't play that. I guess they saw that I was aiming for this fork, so they brought the rook up here to defend against it. Again, I'm supposed to play a4. I did not. I played bishop to why did I play that? Okay, I don't know. I don't know what that does, but that's my inaccuracy for the game. What was I aiming for there? They clearly have 2 defenders on this pawn, so I wasn't aiming for that. Oh, maybe I was aiming to push my b pawn, and I wanted a little bit more support for it from the bishop. Maybe that's what it was. Anyway, I did play this. b5 is my opponent's best move. They're kicking the knight out, right? Well, I only have a few places that it can even go. I brought it back over here. My opponent was not content with kicking that knight out. They just kept coming. Now they're going to kick the bishop out. I have to drop it back. I should have dropped it back where it was, according to this, or just taken it with the A pawn. But instead, I dropped back this way. So now my opponent has a little bit of an advantage. And now again, it's my opponent's best move to play H6 for that other knight on G5. They did play it. I'm supposed to bring it back. But almost as good is taking this pawn. Okay, well, see, I did take the pawn. And they took back, and now I'm supposed to bring this knight back. This is where I blundered. And this is where what I said earlier comes in to be really important, is that in a daily game, you don't see what they just played, and then I play over here, and then I remember that that knight's in trouble. Instead, I come back, having not seen the game for hours or possibly a day or more, and see that they've just taken my pawn. It's like, okay, that's what's going on here. And what I should do is examine all over the entire board and realize, oh yeah, I left that knight hanging. But instead, I went about with the plan that I had originally conceived of when I pulled this bishop out here in the first place, which was to chip away at those pawns, and I pushed my c-pawn. Well, that gives them a free knight. It's not even their best move to take the knight. It's their best move to take this pawn first, because then I'll have two pieces hanging. And when I take back, then they can still take the knight. But they took the knight, and I realized, oh, I didn't look at the whole board when I came back and made that previous move. So now my opponent is up nearly -3 because I just gave him a piece. As I said, I decided to keep playing. I took this. Of course, now I have extra pieces aimed over here, including the bishop, and that's what I'm going after. My opponent brought that rook back, which I didn't think was the best move. Okay, no, their best move is rook to b8. Well, which A, prevents me from doing the pawn fork if I move one forward, and B attacks my rear B pawn. If I take here, then they can get this one, I guess. No, that one's protected by the queen. Well, then I'm not sure why rook to b8's their best move. Anyway, they dropped that rook back, so the two rooks are protecting each other. I can still take their A pawn, which I did, but I'm still down -2 because of that piece. They still have kind of a mass of pawns in the center. They're supposed to move one of them, but their second best move is to put a knight in here at the front of them, which I guess is good. They're putting an attacker on this pawn, okay. But I think, is that the only thing they're doing? Not sure. But anyway, remember earlier when I was trying to get a knight down here, I saw that since they've put that rook back, this square is still open. It does turn out that it's my best move to play knight to c4, and I'm aiming in here. Of course, my opponent saw that, and they went to protect it. There are multiple ways to guard against that, but they chose the best one, and now they have extra pieces aimed at this pawn. They have two pieces aimed at that pawn. My queen's the only thing defending it. My best move, according to Stockfish, is to take this free pawn over here on g5. Well, I didn't think of that. If I had done that, they would have taken here, right? Yes. And then I would have taken their knight. They would have taken, and then I would have taken their queen, and then they would have taken my queen, and then I assume I would have to move the rook up here to protect the bishop that their knight was forking along with my rook. Wow, okay, but instead I just saw that they were about to get my B pawn, so I moved it forward. So now the B pawn is defended, the knight's defended, the other pawn is defended, and I don't know why, but Stockfish says their best move is to take my E pawn, and then I would take. But, oh, because, yeah, no, I wouldn't take. Oh, hopefully. It says that I would, so maybe that's my best move, but this pawn, okay, well, that makes sense then, because my D pawn is protecting my knight right now. So my E pawn is undefended. Okay, well then I see that's why that's their best move and why me playing b4 wasn't the best idea. My opponent didn't see that, which is perfectly understandable because that's a maybe not expert level, but certainly intermediate, certainly at our level or above to see that, that if I do take back, they're going to get this knight. So anyway, they didn't see that. They dropped this back, which I don't know what their intention was here. Maybe they wanted to help defend this pawn while they marched the other one forward. Okay, I get that. If you do want to start moving this pawn, I'm attacking that one, and your D pawn's defending your front E pawn. So maybe that's why they moved the knight back, was to help protect their front E pawn so that they could move their D pawn forward. I'm not sure. Regardless, I don't like where that knight is sitting, so I moved my bishop up to kind of push it out, or at least threaten it. I was willing to trade for it at this point. Also, I'm assuming that I'm lost because I'm down a piece. Their best move is d5, so that must be what they were thinking. Or maybe Stockfish says, well, now that you've moved the knight back here to protect the e-pawn, maybe now play d5. That's what my opponent played, which tells you that's probably what their plan was all along. It's my best move to take it. And then when they take back, then it's my best move to play here. Why? Because when they take back, nothing will be defending this knight. Okay, I understand. But instead, I went after their queen, which isn't that great because they can just move their queen. But this is where my opponent did the same thing that I did earlier with my knight. When they came back to the board, nope, it's not the same thing. I was going to say it was the same thing. They came back to the board, have to reevaluate the position from scratch and decide what to do. But in this case, they're shown what my previous move was. And the only place the knight can go from there is back to where it was, or attack the queen, or come back here. And they have to be pretty sure I'm not coming back here or going back to where I was. Yeah, this is just this is more of an, yeah, I don't know if it's the same thing as what I did or not, because in my case, there was an intermediate move where I took something over here while leaving my knight in danger. And then after they took back and I came back to the board, I forgot that my knight was over there because the action was over here in this section. But in this case, the action is right here facing their queen. So I think it's a little different, but it's basically the same idea. They came back to a daily game after having not seen it for a while, done something else in their life, or played against other opponents in other daily games, and came back and didn't see that their queen was in danger. They definitely need to move it either to c6 or b7. There might be other moves, and they're still up -2, but they didn't. And of course, my only good move here is to take the queen, which I did. They resigned. I think in this case, I might have resigned as well. Whereas I said in the other game, I don't know if I would have resigned or not. In this one, I think I would have. Queen's a pretty big thing to lose for not quite free. They're going to get it, or they're going to get, they're probably going to take the bishop, right? I was expecting them, if they continued playing, to take the bishop, and then I would take back with the knight, and then they would probably take a pawn, and I would still just be up a whole queen for one piece. It says their second best move is just to back up and take that pawn. And that if they did, I would take the knight. I don't think I would. I think if they backed up and took that pawn, wouldn't I just take there? No, I wouldn't because of, no. Yeah, I think I would just take the bishop. I think if they backed up and took that pawn, it says I wouldn't, but I'm curious about that. If they had backed up and took the pawn, wouldn't take it. Why not? Okay, it would still be fine. Still +6. Okay, that's weird. Okay, now it says that's my top move. That's another one of those instances where what seemed instinctive to me, Stockfish didn't even think about it until I did it and backed up. And now Stockfish saying, yeah, that one's pretty good. That's weird. Well, I've used up my time here. Hopefully you got something out of this. I think I did too, especially when it comes to daily games. I know that at least a couple of these probably had to do with the fact that you leave the game after each move and you come back later. But the queen thing, I don't know about that. Maybe my opponent is still sticking around the channel and can chime in here and, you know, tell me what they were thinking at this point. I don't know what just happened there. And tell me what they were thinking at this point when they can see that my last move was moving the knight here and why they thought this was a good idea. That just seems like an awful blind spot right there. I don't know. It's hard to tell what's going on in someone else's mind. I'm sure someone has had the same curiosity about some of my moves and just cannot explain to themselves why I would have done that. Thank you for spending your time here, as always, and I'll see you next time.